And joining us now inside the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show studios for the very first time, the voice of the Texas Rangers, Eric Nadel. Eric, welcome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
I know you've got a very big week ahead of you. First of all, Saturday is your 75th birthday. A preliminary happy birthday to you, because that's a big time number. That's one that is absolutely worth celebrating. So happy birthday to you.
Thanks very much. And as it turns out, the Eagles are playing at Globe Life Field on Saturday.
There you go.
So on the actual birthday, I will get to see the Eagles. And it's actually about the fourth time I've seen them in the last year, because I've been to the Sphere 3 times.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, the Sphere is unbelievable.
Excited about seeing them at the ballpark. It won't be the Sphere, but it'll be great.
Yeah. And in advance of that, tomorrow, Thursday night, you have the birthday benefit that you're holding. And tell us a little bit about this event, what it means to you. I know this is something that you've done for some time, but this year in particular is one that you really wanted to blow out.
Right. It started when I decided to have my 60th birthday at the Kessler Theater, which had recently opened as a music venue. And so I got 2 of my favorite artists to play, and I bought out the whole balcony. And afterwards, I was talking with some friends, and they said, you should do this every year, and maybe you should do it as a benefit. You know, find a mental health charity, since those are the causes that are, so dear to you, and see if you can raise a little bit of money. And I thought, what a great idea. I can bring in a band or 2 that I love, make some money for a charity, and celebrate my birthday. Now's the 14th year. We lost 1 year to COVID, but this is the 14th year, and it's the second year we're at the Longhorn Ballroom. We had to move from the Kessler because we outgrew it. We didn't have room for all the fans. We didn't have room for all the sponsors. So now we're at the Longhorn Ballroom, and for my 75th, we kind of blew out the budget, and we're bringing in 2 big high-energy bands from each coast. Sammy Ray and the Friends from Brooklyn, who have a charismatic female singer who's just sensational, named Sammy Ray, and Chuck Prophet and his cumbia shoes. Chuck's been a big favorite of mine for years. He's a legend in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they're playing a brand of Latin rock called cumbia, which comes from Colombia. And those are the 2 bands, and we have an auction, both silent and live. And that's how we raise the money for the Grant Halliburton Foundation. Grant Halliburton Foundation provides mental health education programs in schools and suicide prevention programs.
How do you go about deciding who gets to perform? I feel like you're a man of many interests, so that's probably an in-depth process.
It is. I've already got a wish list for next year going, and
okay.
in fact, we even have a couple of offers out for next year, without even knowing for sure what the date is going to be. But it's constantly on my mind. Every time I see a band or an artist who I really like, would this work?
Yeah.
As the guest in the birthday show. And it's changed a little bit since we moved to the Longhorn. At the Kessler, it was more of an acoustic show. Okay. It's more of a listening room, and the Longhorn Ballroom is more of a party vibe. So as we've moved to the Longhorn, we're concentrating more on bands rather than solo artists and duos. And you need a lot of sound to fill up that place, and these 2 bands can really do it.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that mental health advocacy is something that's been important to you for a long time. You've shown not only advocacy but leadership in this space at various different points throughout your career. Take us through why that is such an important piece of your life and such an important piece of who you are.
Yeah, my mother worked for a mental health organization in Brooklyn, New York when I was growing up, and we became aware, my sister and I, that there are a lot of people who deal with mental health issues, and back then they referred to it as emotionally disturbed, which I guess can be pretty accurate, but we became aware of the fact that it's a real problem. We actually had a history of it in our family, and as a result, those causes have always been dear to me. And then as I started experiencing mental health issues in the early 2000s, it became more important to me to erase the stigma around mental illness, mental health issues, and be able to talk freely about it. And that's what the Grant Halliburton Foundation does. They encourage kids in schools to check in with each other, learn the signs of distress, and talk about it. And they not only work with the kids, they work with the parents, and they work with the teachers, so that everybody is aware that it's okay, for a kid to say, I'm just not feeling right, or I'm waking up anxious, or for whatever reason, I'm sad all the time. These are things that are symptoms of depression and anxiety that people are usually, ashamed or afraid to talk about.
And you showed that leadership to me more prominently than ever in 2023 when you stepped away the way that you did from the broadcast for a portion of that season. And for that year to be the year where the Rangers go on the run that they went on, win the World Series, obviously by that point you were back in the mix and doing the broadcast again. It felt poetic that was the way that year went for you in your life. I wonder what it was like to live through that year, have the difficulty. You tell me how you would describe what early 2023 felt like and looked like for you, but then for that to be the way that it all finished just felt like a beautiful way for that year to be completed.
Yeah, the first few months of that season I describe as a black hole. You know, you wake up every day and for no reason, apparently, you're just sad and you're anxious and you can't sleep. And, you know, I used talk therapy, I used medication, I used relaxation techniques and meditation, and eventually started feeling better, but I was taking a lot of medication for anxiety, and I couldn't think quickly enough, I felt, to do my job at the level that I'm used to doing it. So I decided to start the season on the sidelines, wait till I got around to what I felt was mental acuity again. And unfortunately, it took a few months, but fortunately, you know, by the second half of the season, I was able to work, and then the Rangers went off on the World Series run. So it wound up as kind of a Cinderella story.
It really is something that every single person deals with in their own ways, but at some point throughout their lives, I think, especially I feel like at least my generation, like it is widespread. And I wonder how much, because baseball is such a mental game, right? Like these players are under such immense stress. Have you seen that take shape in some of the guys that you've covered throughout your career, and how have you, I guess, use your own experience to either relate to them or talk to them or completely not talk to them? Like, how has that happened for you over the course of your career?
It's been a huge change over the years. You know, when I started in 1979, no player in his right mind would have admitted to anybody that he was undergoing depression or anxiety. In a lot of cases, they didn't even know what it was.
Right.
And then as the years have gone by and people started talking more freely about it, I think Zach Greinke was the first one to actually walk away from his team because he was dealing with social anxiety and depression. And that focused a lot of attention on the idea that it can't just be him. You know, there must be others. And then others started speaking out. And then people in other sports, you know, Michael Phelps has been, you know, very vocal about his issues, and Simone Biles, and, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And every team now has a mental skills coach. You know, they have therapists for players to talk to if they need to. You know, they have resources and they encourage the players to talk about it. Whereas 20 years ago, a player would have been, I wouldn't say he'd be blacklisted, but it would definitely be a black mark on him as teams consider whether or not this is a player that they want.
And if we can call up SOT 10, because the way that all of that ended was with your call of the final out of the World Series in 2023 in Arizona in Game 5, and a moment that Rangers fans will never forget.
Spores kicks and fires. He struck him out looking. It's over. It's over. The Rangers have won the World Series. Ranger fans, you're not dreaming. The Rangers are the World Series champions. 52 years in Texas, 63 years of the franchise. The wait is over, and the celebration has begun.
You have talked before about how you didn't want to script it this time, how you had maybe in 2010, 2011, as you were anticipating that moment. This time you wanted to just be off the cuff and natural and in the moment, but I know that was a moment you were dreaming about for going back. You said 1979 is obviously when you began with the franchise. To have that kind of run with a team, and to have this come after all of that waiting, all of that, frankly, and Rangers fans can speak to this, pain between then and now, to then have that moment. What was that like for you to live through and then interact with Rangers fans in the days and weeks and months afterward?
It was a combination of exhilaration and relief.
Yeah.
You know, the whole "you're not dreaming" thing, it came to me that day. The Rangers were up 3-1. We were very confident that we were the better team. We had Evaldi on the mound that night. You know, Matt Hicks and Jared Sandler and I talked during the day. We felt very strongly the Rangers were going to win the World Series that night. And I thought, this can't be real. I must be dreaming. and I scribbled down on a little piece of notepaper at the Arizona Biltmore, "You're not dreaming," and I stuck it in my wallet. And then when the Rangers went ahead 1-0, I took it out of my wallet and I stuck it in the back of my scorebook. And when Marcus Semien hit the home run in the top of the 9th inning to really put the game on ice, I pulled it out of the back of the scorebook and I put it right down flat in the middle of the scorebook so that when the game was over, at some point in the call, I would remember to say, "You're not dreaming," because I'm sure people were thinking the same thing. This can't possibly be real. And even now, as I watch that clip and I relive it again and again, it's hard for me to believe it actually happened.
This is the angle, obviously, from behind you in the broadcast booth in that moment, as you can see the Rangers in the background pouring onto the field and celebrating together. It's a moment that any of us that were there to live through and experience will not forget, because candidly, championships around here are not super common. It's the only one that I've covered in 11 plus years worth of working in this market, and it's something that Rangers fans earned through the blood, sweat, and tears of the dozens of years that led to finally having that.
And the pain of 2011 coming so close twice and not actually finishing off the job. And I think that probably made the win so much sweeter and so much more cathartic for Ranger fans. The fact that we all went through that horrible experience in 2011, and I think it brought Ranger fans together in a communal way, so that when they actually won, it was more of a group experience than it would have been.
Do you find that it's almost a challenge to be able to make the call, but also feel whatever you're feeling in that moment? Like, there are times, in these really special moments of games or whatever experiences where, yes, you're doing your job, but you're also a human being experiencing emotions. Like, how were you able to not cry? I'd be tearing up.
Well, first I thought my heart was going to jump out of my chest as we got close to the moment, as it got to 2 strikes, and I realized this is actually going to happen. And I have felt that before. I remember I've actually never called the 27th out of a Ranger no-hitter. The closest we came was Yu Darvish had a perfect game for 8 2/3 in Houston several years ago, and I remember feeling the same thing. This guy's going to pitch a complete game, and I'm going to get to call it. As it turned out, Marwin Gonzalez spoiled it with a single through Darvish's legs. Thanks, Marwin. But it was the same sort of thing. We get excited too, and you have to stay calm. You have to stay composed. And then, once the call was over, I sank down in my chair, and it was like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. But it was, there were a lot of tears, and Jared was down on the field doing interviews, and when Jared came back up, that's when it really got emotional in the booth, when Matt and Jared and I, for the first time, were together after the final out, and we realized, the Rangers really pulled this off, and, we got a chance to tell that news. I've always been kind of the bearer of bad news throughout my career. That's kind of been my legacy. And finally, to be able to spread the good news was just so fantastic.
Well, it should be said somewhere along the way in this interview, and I'll take the opportunity now, as you mentioned the other two members of your crew. You guys do a terrific job night in and night out for this fan base. So it truly do a terrific job. You mentioned 1979, beginning your career. You're 27, about to turn 28 years old. You're a young man just setting out in your career, and you get hired by the Texas Rangers. What were those early years like for you as you are beginning what you probably didn't know then was going to be this decades-long run?
I had no idea. In fact, I was a hockey announcer. I grew up wanting to be the voice of the Rangers, the New York Rangers. And
funny how life works out, right?
I had minor league hockey jobs for 6 years in Muskegon, Michigan, and Oklahoma City, and then in Dallas for 2 years. I got hired to do the Ranger games based on a 4-game audition into a cassette recorder. They hired me to start the next year, and I'm convinced the big reason they hired me is they didn't have to pay moving expenses. I was already here.
Whatever it takes.
And I loved the Rangers. I loved baseball. Even though I was broadcasting hockey, I was going to Ranger games on a regular basis, and so I knew what was going on. I was familiar with who the players were, so I was able to do a passable audition, even though I'd never broadcast baseball. The pacing in broadcasting baseball is completely different from hockey. The two sports couldn't be more different. And in order to develop the conversational style that people are comfortable listening to on a baseball broadcast, it took years. And the first couple of years, I've listened to some of those tapes. I don't want to hear them anymore. It sounded like baseball on ice. It was a little too frantic for a Major League Baseball game, and it really took a while, to get it down. I was very fortunate. My first partner was John Miller, who went on to do Sunday Night Baseball for a long time, and he's been the voice of the San Francisco Giants for many years. So he kind of became my mentor as a baseball announcer. And then a couple of years later, Mark Holtz was brought in, and he had done minor league hockey in Denver for a long time. And he was one of the very best at using his personality and making people know that he was a good guy. And that's part of the secret of being a successful baseball announcer is, it's so frequent that people hear you. It's every day that you have to wear well on people. They have to think you're a good guy. They have to have the feeling they want to hang out with you. It's almost more important than the way you describe a home run or a game-winning play is how they feel about you, because there's so much time you're just talking.
Yeah.
In a 3-hour baseball game, the ball's in play for less than 15 minutes. The rest of the time is the announcers going blah, blah, blah. And, people have to be comfortable listening to it. They have to enjoy listening to it and be relaxed listening to it. It's not like hockey where there's an urgency to it all the time, or football where every play is a big play because there are only 16 games. It's a whole different experience, a whole different broadcast skill. And it really did take a while. I was very fortunate the Rangers stuck with me. One of the reasons was when I was hired, one of the reasons they hired me was I told them I would help them sell advertising too, which I had always done in my minor league hockey jobs.
Oh, yeah.
And they were looking for help that way. And I was actually pretty good at it. I didn't like it, but I sold a lot of advertising. I made them some money. And as a result, I think they were willing to live with me despite how rough it might have sounded the first year or two, because I was making some money for them.
Having called baseball for so many decades now, what still gives you chills at the ballpark?
A steal of home, an inside the park home run, a triple, a walk-off home run, even any kind of walk-off hit, really, by our team, not necessarily by the other team. And again, this no-hitter thing is about the only thing that I haven't had a chance to do in baseball broadcasting. I've broadcast no-hitters, but I was the second guy. Nolan Ryan, 2 no-hitters. Kenny Rogers, a perfect game. But Mark Holtz was doing the final outs in those games. He was the number 1 announcer. I've never had a chance to call the final out of a Ranger no-hitter. I've done it on opposing players. Mark Burley threw a no-hitter against the Rangers. Corey Kluber did. Joe Musgrave did. But I've never done the final out of a Ranger no-hitter. And that would be really exciting for me to get to the 9th inning again if there's a Ranger who has a no-hitter going.
There's a couple of guys on the roster right now that are candidates to
Jacob
maybe do
DeGrom's
it.
never thrown a no-hitter, which is it's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah.
It tends to show you, though, just how much luck is involved in a no-hitter. Generally, it means that every play is made. It means that every little bloop somehow gets caught. Every little infield dribbler turns into an out, not an infield hit.
I do have to ask, I'm so curious. What is harder to broadcast? A chaotic playoff game or a quiet Tuesday in July?
The hardest games to broadcast are one-sided, quiet games in July.
Okay.
A game that gets out of hand early, especially if you're losing. You have to give people a reason to listen to the game. With the chaotic playoff game, that people are listening.
Yeah.
It's up to you to just, keep up with it. But say you're down 10-0 in the 4th inning, and especially if your team's not in the race. But even if it is, a game like that, you're not going to win. You have to give people a reason to listen to the games. That's where it's important that they want to hang out with you, know that you're a good guy. And that's when we start looking for what Mark Holtz used to call diversionary tactics.
Commiserate together.
We start talking about movies. We start talking about, where we ate, what we're going for dinner, what concert I'm going to go to after the game. That sort of thing, anything to keep the crowd entertained, keep them amused. That's how a few years ago I came up with the idea of doing a limerick every game to give people a reason to listen, because the Rangers were basically out of contention by May that year.
Yeah.
So in order to get people to stay with the game and listen to the game, I was writing a limerick during the game every day and reading it in the 8th inning, which is a goofy
Incredible.
thing to do, but probably kept some of the people around.
Yeah. Take us back, because you talked about growing up in New York, wanting to be the New York Rangers broadcaster. I know you grew up in Brooklyn. What were you like at 8, 10, 15? What was young Eric Nadel like?
Well, I was hooked on sports and I was hooked on radio. I loved the radio DJs. I grew up in New York with, big-time radio DJs. Murray the K, who's, in every radio Hall of Fame, and Cousin Brucey on WABC with the top 40. And I would listen religiously to those guys. I always had the pillow covering my transistor radio at night when I went to bed. If there was no baseball game on or no hockey game on, then I'd be listening to, WABC and whatever
77.
whatever the songs were. That's right. And I was playing every sport I could play. My life revolved around sports. I was out in the street in Brooklyn playing stickball and playing touch football, and that was really all that I was interested in, was radio and sports. And I took a liking to the baseball on radio. One day I was driving with my dad in his car. He was a dentist, listening to a Yankee game. It was a weekday afternoon, and I asked him how the announcers, got to get off work so they could go to the game that day and watch the game. And he said, no, that is their work. I said, wait a second, so you're going to go fill cavities and they're going to go and watch a baseball game and eat some hot dogs and go blah, blah, blah?
You gotta love kids.
I said, they've got a better job than you do, Dad. That's what I'm going to do. And I was probably 8 years old. And so
that's
at
awesome.
that point, I started listening religiously to the baseball games. All we had was the Yankees at that point, and then the Mets
That's a
came
lot of
in.
Mel Allen, probably.
Mel
back
Allen
in
and
your...
Red Barber,
Yeah.
and then the Scooter, Phil Rizzuto joined the team, and Jerry Coleman.
Okay.
And then the Mets came in 1962 with Bob Murphy and Lindsey Nelson and Ralph Kiner, and of course they were the worst team in Major League history that year. But we loved him. And the announcers made it sound like they were going to win the World Series. They were so good at bringing out whatever good feature a player had. That was all they talked about. Choo Choo Coleman, their catcher, who hit about 160, was the best in the league at blocking low pitches. Well, he had a lot of practice because the Mets pitchers were bouncing a lot of them. But
Get more opportunities.
it's really been an inspiration to me because they always sounded like they were having fun.
Even back then, you were learning how to be the Rangers broadcaster.
Exactly. They were glad to be there. They were having fun. They had a smile in their voice all the time, even though the Mets were getting crushed every day. And when we go through a bad season, I think about that, and it really is an inspiration to me that you can still have a good time, you can still be happy, even if your team isn't great. It's still Major League Baseball, and you're watching the best players in the world.
And you get to go to work and eat hot dogs and watch the game.
That's it.
There you go.
We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back more with Eric Nadel, the voice of the Texas Rangers. We're going to talk about the future of the game, some of the recent changes in the game of baseball when we come back on the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Back on the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, Texas Rangers voice Eric Nadel joining us in studio today. His 75th birthday on Saturday. The Eric Nadel birthday benefit is tomorrow night. And the Rangers themselves are playing some halfway decent baseball thus far this season. What has been your takeaway from what has been kind of up and down, but has been certainly good enough to be right in the mix with the rest of a very mediocre American League?
In keeping with the way baseball usually is, it's all been totally unexpected. We're coming out of spring training, the big worry was the bullpen. This is going to be the Achilles heel of this team. They're going to score a bunch of runs this year. We know they have great starting pitching, but they didn't sign a closer. They don't have a proven eighth inning guy, and here we are a quarter of the way into the season. The bullpen is the best in the major leagues, and they haven't been able to score runs. They're last in the American League in scoring runs. So once again, baseball remains the most unpredictable game in the world. And fortunately, despite a record 2 games under 500, they're right in the thick of things. They're just 2.5 games out in the division race. They're only a half a game out in the wild card race. And it could go either way. If the offense picks up, I think that, they'll be just fine. And it's hard to imagine the bullpen will be this good the whole year. There'll be some returning to the norm, you would think, but that doesn't mean they still can't be the best bullpen in the league. Right now, they're a half a run better than anybody else, which is ludicrous. But it's a big reason that they are within 2 games of 500. They've had a very hard schedule so far. In fact, statistically, mathematically, the hardest schedule. And from now on, they have the easiest schedule in the major leagues. So, we're really optimistic that this is going to be a nice long run.
Yeah, there's certainly reason to believe that can be the case.
This offense compared to last year's offense, what do you see?
The big thing that we see is that Brandon Nimmo at the top of the lineup has given the Rangers, a legitimate on-base guy, whether he's batting first as he did every game until last night or dropped down to second. This is a guy who's going to get on base a lot, and the Rangers didn't really have that last year as Marcus Semien declined and had to be taken out of the leadoff spot. And then Rangers never really found a leadoff hitter who had any kind of respectable on-base percentage. So I think that's the big change. What's been surprising is that the bounce-back candidates, if you will, haven't really bounced back that well. Talking about Jake Berger and Evan Carter and Jock Peterson. Now, Peterson has come on in the last couple of weeks. The bounce-back candidate who has bounced back is Josh Young. That's a big success. But going into the season, we kind of felt, we being the broadcasters, that if the Rangers hit on 2 or 3 of those bounce-back guys, that the offensive production would probably go from last year's 4.2 runs a game, up closer to 5, which is what they averaged in the World Series year. As it turns out, the runs per game has declined so far, but they have been facing the best pitching staffs in the league, and that's probably a factor. Still, you're looking for Jake Berger to get some consistency, or at least go on one of those torrid hot streaks where he can carry the team for a few weeks. Waiting for Evan Carter to get the batting average up over 200, although he's had some very timely hits and his defense has been incredible. But they just haven't clicked on all the cylinders you expected them to click on.
You mentioned Josh Young. I mean, he's been one of the best hitters in baseball this season. Is there something that has jumped out to you that has allowed him to kind of get back to what we thought he was going to be early on in his career before the injuries got in his way?
I'm sure there are mechanical changes that I don't understand, but the thing that's easily visible is he's hitting the ball all over the ballpark.
Yeah.
He's getting the majority of his hits to right field and center field. He hasn't even pulled a home run yet. All of his home runs have gone either to right field or to center field. That's the thing that's pretty obvious in looking at it. But remember, at the beginning of the season, he was struggling.
Yeah.
He batted 8th one game. He batted 9th one game.
Ezekiel Duran was getting reps at third.
And here he is batting 3rd and 4th every game and, driving in runs and 2nd in the league in batting average. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Speaking of, Zeke Duran's been fantastic as well of late. We do want to bring in our Andrew Seeley back in the mix here because we want to play a little game with you, and Andrew, I will pitch it to you to allow you to kind of set this up, because this is the first time we finally played this game on this version of the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show.
It's funny it's taken this long, to be fair, because it's the most played game we've had on the Sunday show for a long time. So we're going to
Michelle's favorite.
Yes, that is part of the pitch here. But let's run this thing.
You just love the music.
The music is everything. That's all I'm saying. It's been far too long. Time for everyone except Michelle's favorite game, no fence riding, which I've had memorized for about 3 years now. For the uninitiated, I've got a series of statements, and the only goal is simple. You got to choose which side of the fence you're on. No fence riding, or we call you out. All right, let's kick things off here with the first VO, if we can, number 50 here. The pitch clock has saved baseball's pace of play. It was one of the most talked about items a few years back. We'll start it off with Mr. Nadel here. What do you think about the pitch clock so far?
Strongly agree. If the pitch clock hadn't been put in, I don't think I'd still be working. The
Wow.
games were taking too long. They were too slow. They weren't fun to watch anymore. I would say the pitch clock, maybe it hasn't saved baseball's pace of play, but it saved my career.
Incredible.
That's outstanding, and I completely agree, because I do feel like it is complete. It saved my interest in the game. I loved baseball when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, a little kid growing up in upstate New York, but I was a Braves fan because my mom was from Atlanta. I'd watch games on TBS every night, and I would watch them from stem to stern. And eventually I fell out of love with the game because at least part of it was it just took forever. And they have reeled me back in the last 5 or 6 years with the changes.
Game again.
Yes.
As someone who hates the fence and likes to ride right along it, I would say I actually strongly agree with this. Yeah, I think the pitch clock has done its part in bringing, like you said, a lot of people back to the game.
Can I, before we move on, I'll present the opposite opinion as someone that has gone just as a fan recently to a baseball game. I do think the fan experience is too fast. We went to go visit Fenway Park and basically had maybe 2 hours to watch the game because the game blew by, and then they all ushered us out of the park, so we didn't get the full total atmosphere of what we purchased for that experience. But the television broadcast is far better. I do agree on that side of things.
That's interesting because, but I feel like that only really matters if you're going to a park like that where you really want to experience. Like, again,
you don't think there's a lot to see at
Fenway,
Globe Life? I'm sorry.
I'm not saying that there's not a lot to see at Globe Life, but I'm
No
saying
fence riding.
Fenway, Wrigley, Dodgers Stadium, Yankee Stadium, obviously some of the pillars, and I know that the new Yankee Stadium is not quite the same as the old Yankee Stadium, but still, those places, I get what you're saying, that, okay, you want to be able to experience the park more, but in general, in mass, I think it's a lot better what they've done.
Oh, 100%. I agree. Let's move on here. Number 2, the ABS system, has been better than advertised. Nadel, we'll start with you again.
I'll strongly agree with that one as well. I love the drama of it. I love the actual execution of it, the way they show you the strike zone on the video screen and on your TV screen, and how close the baseball was to being a strike if it wasn't a strike. It's really made me appreciate the umpires even more because their misses are so infinitesimally small. You know, a guy misses a call by an inch on a pitch going 100 miles an hour that's changing direction. They are really, really good. And I love the strategy involved and when you're going to use the challenge system. I think it's been a huge success.
I don't know that I would agree with saying it's been better than advertised for 2 main reasons. One, if I was an umpire who was being put on blast in front of 30,000 people for getting my job wrong by this much, I think I would need a new job. 2, for a ball to miss by literally this much and the batter be given a ball call for that and the pitcher have to stop, face a 1-0 count instead of an 0-1 count. We know statistically,
or walk
right,
instead of a strikeout.
Or I was going to say, we know statistically what happens to the percentage or probability of a player getting a hit based on a 1-0 or an 0-1, and same thing goes as the count grows. I think for pitchers to have to be that precise and that perfect is a little bit of a makes me give. I take a little bit of pause with that just because it's like, okay, it's already hard enough. That part of it makes me, I don't know. It
sounds a lot like waffling. I'm not sure which side are we
on
here.
Every sport, though, has pushed in the direction of more offense to try and bring in viewers. And even if this does make a small impact in that direction, that it makes it harder to stop teams from scoring, that's probably a net positive for the game. I do love your point, though, about the intensity, the drama of the moment. And obviously, the system is very similar to the tennis Hawkeye system. I feel like the one change that we all need to make is do the tennis thing. And as we're waiting, start the... and go like really lean into that piece of it. I think that could be fun.
So my only take on this is I think it's changed it being a negative for the umpire missing a call to a positive that the pitcher can hit the zone. And I think it changes how we look at the game in a positive light, and that's another positive for baseball overall. Coming on, number 3 here. The zombie runner is an abomination. This is, I think, a collective opinion shared amongst everybody, but again, curious where Nadel stands on this.
I love the zombie runner.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
See, this is where I think you're going to get into. This is the broadcaster that wants the game to end already.
It's not that I want the game to end, but I want instant drama in extra innings. I don't want to sit around for 5 innings waiting for that home run that's going to eventually end the game.
Yeah.
I love the fact that there's an immediate scoring chance for both teams. They have to decide whether to bunt the runner over or not. What sort of strategy they're going to use. It saves pitching staffs. That was one of the big reasons it was put in, so that you wouldn't have to use your whole bullpen in a 16-inning game. Obviously, I like the fact that the games end more quickly, but mostly I love the fact that the games don't drag on.
Yes.
Every extra inning is exciting because every extra inning starts with a runner at second base.
See, to me, this is the best part about it, is exactly what you're like. It's just like the shootout in hockey. I get that people don't necessarily love the shootout, and it's not really hockey. Fine. Fine. It's the regular season. We need these games to end. These guys' bodies are being run into the ground for 180 days. We don't need to artificially extend these games to, we had games going 18, 19 innings. That's ridiculous, and it's not necessary in the middle of July. It is necessary in October. Obviously, the rules, just like in hockey, have to be different in the playoffs. But in the regular season, this feels like a way to make sure that you're not burning out not just the pitching staffs, but the entirety of these rosters.
Explain why you think it's an abomination, because clearly you do.
What, me?
Yeah.
I think what Nadel is complaining about is more the state of
Show
baseball.
your work, Andrew.
Sure, as usual. I think the complaint is more levied at baseball itself as opposed to the zombie runner itself. Like, waiting around for a home run says that's how people are playing the game, not trying to get base hits. And I would rather change the game, and doing it artificially through a zombie runner doesn't do anything for me. I guess that's part of it. And we're two statements ago I was sitting there saying games are moving too fast, so I'm already on the wrong side on that fence. So that's kind of the push and pull of this discussion in a nutshell.
Okay, I should point out, too, my partner, Matt Hicks, is diametrically opposed to me on this one.
Okay.
And we debate this one at least a couple of times a year. He thinks that the zombie runner just totally distorts all of baseball statistics, because you have a runner who's didn't earn his way on base, a run that scores that technically gets called an unearned run, a pitcher who gets charged with a loss because a runner scored that he wasn't really responsible for. It doesn't even go on his record as an earned run, but yet he gets charged with a loss, various things like that. And so what's the solution? The solution is the way they do it in Japan. If nobody wins in 12 innings, it's a tie. What's wrong with putting ties into baseball in order to prevent the games from going too long?
It's fun to consider that, because hockey has done everything it can to avoid ties and that discrepancy, and now baseball's like, yeah, why not? Let's see if ties work.
Paging Bud Selig somewhere.
In Japan, the reason they started it in Japan, I don't know if nobody had thought of the zombie runner or not, but they had to end the game sooner because the subway stopped running at 11 o'clock or something like that. And if the game was ran beyond that, they were going to be stuck with a stadium full of people till the morning.
When did the subway stop running at Globe Life Field?
The what?
I don't think they ever started.
All right, one last thing before we move on here. Banning the shift did nothing. Batting averages are still down across the league. Might as well bring them back and let batters remember how to hit into the gaps. Nadel, where do you sit?
I like the shift, too. I like seeing the players play in the positions that they're supposed to play. I don't know if you're a purist for banning the shift or if you're a purist for not banning the shift. But I like seeing the shortstop play shortstop. I don't like seeing him play short right field. It was a real challenge for me as an announcer, especially in the new stadiums where we sit up high, like we do at Globe Life Field, to even know who the guy was out in right field. If you didn't watch the players as they moved in between batters or in between pitches, you didn't know if it was the third baseman, the second baseman, or the shortstop who was roving around out there in short right field because we're too high to actually recognize him. I don't think the shift was, I hate to use this word, it wasn't natural to me. To me, it distorted the game more than banning the shift does.
I feel like if there's a purist in the room, it's got to be you. So if that's baseball purity at its finest, then.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not totally a purist, though. There's a rule I'd like to see put in, and I was the one many, many years ago who started advocating for limiting the number of pickoff throws. And everybody laughed at me. No, that'll never happen. There'll be too many stolen bases. That's ridiculous. And now, of course, it's in there, and everybody really likes it, it seems. I would like to see a limit on the number of foul balls you can hit with 2 strikes.
Ooh.
Oh.
There you go. Really
I'm not amused by these 15 pitch at bats, to tell
Really?
you the truth. I don't like them. And again, it's not because I want the game to end sooner. I want to conserve the pitcher's arm.
But do you not feel like it gives the batter an advantage, seeing as many pitches as he can until he can?
And my feeling is if he can't put a ball in play in 5 strikes, he should be out. So my rule is after 2 strikes, you get 2 more foul balls. On the 3rd foul ball after 2 strikes, which is strike 5, it becomes the bunt rule. If you foul it off, you're out.
So you were not a fan of Nathaniel Lowe when he was on the team in 23, and he would routinely have 10
I
pitch.
love Nathaniel. That at bat did not bring me great pleasure.
Well said. Not riding the fence.
And
Riding
everybody's
the fence.
laughing at me about this proposal, but someday, who knows?
Listen, a lot of the things that they have done have increased the pace of play, and I think that has, by and large, brought especially the younger core of fans around and back to the game. And what's that going to look like 20 years from now? Another younger core that's going to have to be catered to in some form or fashion. Maybe this isn't as far off as we think it is.
You know, when we want starting pitchers to go deeper into the game, this is one thing that'll help. You know, it'll save some pitches on the starting pitcher's arm every game.
Do you have another one, Andrew, or was that it?
No, we're done. I'm done riding the fence. I'm good.
I wanted to make sure I didn't jump the gun because I do want to circle back to the event tomorrow night. Tell us again about why this is so important to you, how this came to be, and what you want people to take out of this birthday benefit.
You know, this is to benefit the Grant Halliburton Foundation, a wonderful nonprofit that provides mental health education programs in schools. This is an important part of their income. The money that we raise from this event, both from the ticket sales, and people can buy tickets at longhornballroom.com, or they can walk up tomorrow night on the night of the show. It starts at 7:30. Tickets start at $25. This isn't like some high-priced gala. You can wear whatever you want, wear shorts or a T-shirt. You know, it's totally casual. And the auction is already online, and people can get involved in the auction by texting the letters ENBB, as in Eric Nadel Birthday Benefit, all lowercase, ENBB, and text that to 44834. Text ENBB to 44834. We have 2 great bands, Chuck Prophet and his Cumbia Shoes, Sammy Ray and the Friends. You don't have to be present to win in the silent auction. But we do have a live auction that has some items that you can only bid on if you're there. That includes dinner with Chris Young at Nick and Sam's for 4 people.
There you go.
A trip to Napa, a trip to Houston to see the Rangers for the weekend with VIP treatment, a visit to the booth, and I'll have lunch with you there. Chad Hauser of Cafe Momentum will come to your house and prepare a meal for 10. And the home plate suite, the one right behind home plate that you see on TV. You can be in there and people can be watching you stuff popcorn in your face all game. Those are all live auction items. In the silent auction, we have a lot of great celebrity meals. Dale Hansen will have you to his house in Waxahachie and provide limo transportation there.
I have been to some of these events. They are raucous. They are a lot of fun. There are a number of things that are consumed, and it is a lot of fun, and they go until like 3 or 4 in the morning. So
provides a lot of
it's
food and
worthwhile
drink.
to bid on that one.
Right, we have a lunch with Elvis Andrews at Chiloso, a lunch with Skip Schumacher at Texas Live, dinner with Ross Fenstermaker, the Ranger general manager, dinner with Neil Liebman, the Rangers managing partner at Al Bernays, a dinner with me at Neighborhood Services. We have experiences that have never been offered before. You can run the dot race. Michelle, would you run the dot race?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, which dot would you choose?
Green.
Green.
Yeah.
I think I'd go blue.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm stuck with red then. Thanks.
Yeah,
guys.
you're stuck.
Sorry.
Can you imagine the 3 of us doing the dot race?
Bid on running the dot race. You can bid on a Ranger Sports Network experience where you get to sit in the radio booth for an inning, the TV booth for an inning. You get to sit with me when I do the Skip Schumacher show, and then you spend an inning in the TV truck.
Okay.
That's awesome.
And a lot of really cool stuff like that. We have similar experiences with the Stars, with Josh Bogorod and Razor, and with Mavericks with Chuck Cooperstein, too. So lots of really cool autographed memorabilia. we came up with a couple of autographed baseballs when the Dallas Wings were throwing out the first pitch. So we have an autographed baseball from Paige Beckers and one from A.Z. Fudd.
Okay.
And we were in Seattle, and Brandi Carlile was singing the national anthem. She's one of my favorites. I got her to sign a baseball.
Nice.
So we have a Brandi Carlile autographed baseball. I don't think that's available anywhere else.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you've never been in a TV truck, by the way, to go back to that one, that's a cool experience just to see how that all happens. I know the Rangers Sports Network crew does a phenomenal job. Pat Madrovsky and his entire team, they go viral every once in a while on Instagram with some of their clips from behind, and you can see how that's all happening. To see that in person
There's
would
a
be
lot of
really,
balls
really
in
cool.
the air in there.
Yes.
They are juggling a lot of stuff.
Yes, spinning about 14 plates. It's very, very cool to see. So that one's worth bidding on as well. Eric Nadel, the voice of the Texas Rangers, the 14th annual Eric Nadel birthday benefit tomorrow at the historic Longhorn Ballroom. Sammy Ray and the Friends, Chuck Prophet and his Cumbia Shoes, the musical co-headliners, and Eric Nadel himself there as well. Eric, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Michelle.